You just muted yourself. I think the presenter is muted.
Problems.
Try again.
Okay. I'm Aaron Michelson. I'm an environmental educator for Pierce County. Hello, welcome. Join us. Uh, our program is funded by garbage rates. So every time someone in Pierce County throws away some garbage, we get a little piece of that, and we use that to help educate the public about ways to be more sustainable, ways to reduce waste, grow food at home. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. We've got folks on Zoom, so that's why I'm like part talking to y'all, but also part talking to Zoom. And I was just saying, very informal, so feel free to ask questions or type them in the chat. So today we're going to be talking about indoor ways to grow food indoors. The reason why this class came about was we do all these different edible gardening classes, composting and fruit tree pruning and all these other things. And it occurred to me that for 95% of my life, I never had a place to garden. It's a very kind of privileged thing. You know, I was either renting or living in a small space or, just renting a room. And so we tried to think of a way, how could we get people growing food still? Even if they don't have that outdoor space, I went through all sorts of little trials and failures trying to get something growing. So we came up with a few different methods and we're going to share them with y'all today. Full disclosure up front, none of them are very, profitable isn't the right word. They're not very cost effective. It's growing on a small scale. So a lot of times you're growing food and that food might cost a little bit less than what it costs to get the same at the grocery store. But you get the benefit of having it right there in your home. You get a little bit of color, some fresh stuff, eat it whenever you want it. It's more of a labor of love than like, oh, I'm really gonna grow all my own veggies. There's not a lot of veggies that grow indoors, but there are a lot of other things like sprouts, microgreens, stuff like that. So we'll get into it. We'll start with just a little land acknowledgement. So I want to acknowledge that the land that we call Pierce County is the traditional homelands of the Nisqually, the Puyallup, the Muckleshoot, and Squaxin Island peoples. And at Pierce County, we have this kind of standard land acknowledgement that we share, but it's sort of meaningless. Words are meaningless without actions. So the actions that we can take at Pierce County are honoring the tribal treaty rights and always leaving a seat at the table for a government to government relationship and trying to be the best stewards of this land that we are guests upon. But actions that other people can take are what you're doing right now, being here, learning how to grow healthy food and um, uh, eat that healthy food, I think is a really important part of a lot of the cultural practices of the tribes. Um, I know that babies make lots of noise and need lots of attention, so feel free to do so. We welcome it. Yeah, don't be shy. Yeah, so
lots of more.
Yes,
another way that we can take action to honor the tribes whose land this is learning the Lushootseed language. If you're ever interested, the Tulalip tribe has a really good learn Lushootseed thing on their website. Just search for Tulalip tribe. And they've got little videos for how to pronounce all the different sounds, some vocabulary games. But there's also great stuff on the Puyallup website and the Lushootseed website as well. So our goals for today is we are going to introduce some different methods of gardening that don't require a yard or an outdoor space. Try to go through some of the pros and cons of like what you need for each so that you maybe choose a method that works best for y'all. And then try to get a little more information for how to take one of those home and say, okay, I can start small with this. Maybe it's sprouts, maybe it's microgreens, something like that. So we'll just get started with a little Q&A for folks on Zoom and in person. So what brought you all to this class? Why were you interested in learning about growing food indoors?
I actually got like a Facebook ad showing me all the different events that were coming up. And this was the most current one. And we're about to start our gardens up. That's me promoting.
Oh, okay. I was wondering, you kind of look like you do.
We're both about to start our own gardens. I was like, how fun to learn the indoor aspect of it as well.
Awesome.
And Laura from Zoom says that she currently has a black thumb and she would like to make it green.
Never heard that term. Okay, cool. Yeah, this is kind of a nice way to start. It's low stakes. It doesn't cost much to get started, and you get that that easy win of, hey, I didn't kill something. My thumb's turning greener. I think that a lot of times when we build this big garden outside, there's this expectation of, oh my God, I spent so much money on these seedlings and the soil, and it's really disappointing when the cabbage moths come and eat all of your crop. But this is, I think, a little lower stakes, and so lower risk, lower reward, but still really good. Yeah, great start.
And
Anyone else?
that says she wants to learn how to grow microgreens.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, thanks y'all for sharing. We're gonna talk about for each different growing method that we talk about, we'll go over like what you get out of it at the end, some of the pros and cons, and then just get into the nitty-gritty of how to actually get it set up. So go over the materials and outputs. So the different methods that we'll talk about today, we'll talk about sprouts and microgreens, which are the very first stages of growth of a plant. They have a lot more nutrients and flavor and texture to them, but they're also just tiny. It's not like we're going to get whole heads of lettuce. You're going to get little sprouts or little greens. We'll talk about mushroom blocks, which are kind of a fun way to grow indoors. Once again, not like saving you a ton of money versus just buying mushrooms at the store. But it does give the opportunity to like, whoa, I grew mushrooms and you can see them growing. And you get access to a lot more species of mushrooms to grow than you would otherwise find, unless you have some super cool farmers market. We'll also talk about hydroponics and aquaponics, which are very expensive to do, but can have really high yields. Hello, welcome. Join us. We're just getting started. We're talking about indoor gardening. Thanks for joining us. This is super informal, so feel free to ask questions at any time. We have some folks on Zoom, so that's why I'm like half talking to y'all, half talking to him. And feel free to stay as long if y'all want. It's late time. We'll probably go for about an hour. Then we'll talk about growing things indoors, like grow tents, which is also very expensive, but can be very productive, like aquaponics. And then last, we'll talk about, hey, maybe you don't want to garden at all. You want to go out and you want to forage some wild greens and wild berries and foods. That's kind of my favorite thing because I'm a nature nerd. So we'll talk about some things. So as we go through each one of these methods, you want to consider a few things. The first is how much space do you actually have? This is an indoor gardening class, so all of these methods are done indoors. That being said, some of them you could do outdoors in like a greenhouse or a shed or something like that. If you only have a windowsill, then pretty easy answer, you can grow microgreens, maybe a little herb or two. If you have a little more space indoors, then you're really only limited by your budget. So next thing is your budget. How much are you willing to spend? Sprouts, microgreens, very cheap. Some of the ones we talk about, like aquaponics, you could spend $10,000 on it, but you can also get $20,000 worth of produce. I've done aquaponics with students before, and they just, oh, you could grow so much in a really small space. You may also want to ask yourself, how much time are you willing to invest in this stuff? We'll kind of order them from least to most amount of effort. And what is your motivation? So that's really good to think about. If your goal is to grow a lot of food, you got to spend a lot of money and spend a lot of time and need a lot of space. If your goal is just to have like some small fresh herbs and fresh greens throughout the year, just year round, don't have to go to the store like it's dinner time. I'm making something that doesn't have a lot of fresh stuff. I just want to snip some little microgreens, cut some fresh herbs. That's another motivation too. It might also just be an aesthetic thing. Maybe you just want to add a little color around your house, and that's totally acceptable as well. So we'll get into it. The very first method that we'll talk about is growing sprouts. Has anyone grown sprouts in person or online?
Not successfully, but I tried.
What made them unsuccessful?
They died.
They died. Okay. Did you try?
In sprouting. Question if they will survive as well.
Okay. Have y'all ever grown them and they got stinky? Yeah. Sprouts get stinky. So we'll talk about some ways to avoid that. That was my main challenge with sprouts was just got stinky. So we'll talk about some ways to prevent that. So sprouts are the very first phase of plant life. So they pretty simply, you just start with some seeds. You can use chickpeas, you can use mung beans, you can use alfalfa, all sorts of different ones. They all have a little different flavor and texture, but they just make their first little shoot and their first two little leaves. And they have a fair amount of nutrients in them, but not as much as something like a microgreen or a full-size veggie. And basically what you're getting is just these little crunchy sprouts. If you've ever gotten pho at a Vietnamese restaurant, they serve it with mung bean sprouts. If you've ever gone to like a hippie restaurant with a floofy salad, you get alfalfa sprouts on it. Some of the other sprouts that are really common. Alfalfa is usually what you get when you go to the grocery store. So it's takes about 2 to 5 days to grow them. Basically, you're just germinating the seeds. And you don't want to let them go too long because they can't actually take root, so they die. So you've got a very short little window and you kind of need to plan it. My wife is making sourdough bread now. And like, if we want sourdough bread, we have to plan like 48 hours in. It's like so many different steps. So it's kind of one of those things like, hey, I'm going to be making pho on Wednesday, so I got to start these on Friday. They're usually pretty pale in color because they haven't gone through photosynthesis. Like they haven't used any of the sun to make sugars. So they don't have all of the nutrients that a plant would get, but you can at the end put them in the sun the very last little bit and they will photosynthesize a little bit and get a little more of the sugars. But generally you're just getting the protein from the seeds and a little bit of crunch and flavor in. It's not a super nutrient dense meal. So one of the pros for growing sprouts is that it's very easy. You don't need a lot of money. You just need some seeds, which you can get at like any garden store. You could get them at like a health food store. You could order them online. You don't need any sunlight to grow. It's kind of nice to finish them off with some sunlight, but not necessary. And you just need some sort of mason jar to grow them in. They do make these fancy little lids that you can buy online if you just go to a health food store or just search for growing sprouts. You'll find these. So it's just a regular thread-on lid, but it has like a mesh grate on the bottom, like window screening, sort of. Alternatively, you just use a regular threaded lid with a bit of cheesecloth, or you could really even use a paper towel. You can grow these year round, so even in like the coldest winter months, you can get them going and just have a little bit of fresh stuff that you can eat. And one of the biggest cons is what we were talking about, stinkiness. So in creating a really good germinating environment for seeds, you're also creating an ideal environment for bacteria to grow. So the best way to prevent that, first, if your seeds are kind of dirty, like if you're getting them from a big bulk bin, you don't like dirty seeds. If you're getting them from like a big bulk bin, like we go to the co-op, the health food store, and there's just a lot of people who have handled it. Or if you're getting it from a garden store, if it, it's coming sealed in a package, it's probably hasn't been touched much. But if it's getting it in bulk, you could do like a little short rinse with some apple cider vinegar first. So just mix up, I don't know, like 1-to-4 ratio, quarter cup of apple cider vinegar or regular white vinegar with about a cup of water. Just swish it around and then drain it. And that'll kind of sterilize the seeds so that you're starting with a little cleaner. But generally, as you're growing these, you'll get some bacterial growth on it. That's very normal. They'll have a little bit of a funky smell, like a barely worn sock, I would say. If you open it up and it kind of burns your nose and really smells stinky, it's bad. So you gotta throw it away. But one way to prevent it from getting stinky is you just give them a rinse every day. Some fresh, clean, cold water. That's all you got. If you have one of these little jars here, they have that metal grate at the bottom. So it's pretty simple. All you do is you just flip it over, fill it with some water, shake it up a couple of times, drain it. You've just rinsed your seeds. If you have it in something like this, you might actually need to dump them into a colander, rinse them in some water, then put them back in. Either way, it's not something you need to do every single day, just as needed if you notice that it's a little funky smelling. We eat lots of stuff with bacteria on it. Kimchi or sauerkraut or yogurt, that's mostly bacteria. Most of the bacteria won't harm you. It can just get a little funky smelling. That's usually what turns people off from doing sprints. So yeah, just give it a rinse every day or two as needed. So methods for doing this is, first of all, you want to pick your seeds. Some really popular ones are sunflower, broccoli, kale, and radish. Oh, I'm sorry. I see you taking notes. We actually, if anyone would like, we have some notes. Don't let me stop you
No.
taking note that you're out, but these are like the things that you found. These are the same things that I'm going through. Do you like your copy? So you're gonna choose your seeds if you want. You can do a little rinse in some apple cider vinegar or regular vinegar. You can dilute it a little bit. Honestly, you could even do it in undiluted vinegar. Fine. Not necessary, but if you keep doing it over and over and they get funky, maybe you might try starting that little vinegar rinse to get started. So you're gonna put them into any mason jar. You can use a cheesecloth, you can use a paper towel. If you have about $3 to spend at a health food store, I highly recommend one of these just because it's so easy to do the rinse. And you're just gonna rinse and repeat. So to get them started, they need some water to activate. So you just put them in there, put some water in it, let them sit in the water for a few minutes, drain it, do it 1 or 2 more times. And then you can keep it out of the sun. If you have a little sunny spot for it, you can put it in the sun, but most importantly, you do want them to stay a little cool. So if you're putting it right on like a windowsill that's getting blasted with sun, it could like cook your greens. But if you have like a, not a south facing window, like east, west, or north, and some indirect sun, then you'll actually get a little photosynthesizing as well. But you could grow them in the sun, you could grow them in the dark, doesn't really matter. Once they get to a couple inches long, then it's time to take them out of the jar and put them in the fridge. And a really good way to store them is just a little paper towel on a plate or in a plastic bag if you have like a used produce bags. Those produce bags are super high tech. I know we just think of them as just like a little plastic bag. They've been meticulously engineered for gas exchange. I don't know if you ever noticed like your lettuce bags, they actually have holes cut in them.
Mhm.
But other bags don't. An old produce bag will keep it much better, but you can also put it in a paper bag. They'll store for about 5 days in the fridge. If they start to get slimy, it's time to throw them away or compost.
The question,
Yes.
if you're doing like to clean them, the rinse with the apple cider vinegar and the water, will that also activate them? Like, should you wait to clean them until you're ready to?
Yep, as soon as the seed
Okay.
gets wet, it's gonna start growing.
Okay.
So yeah, right before you do that. Yes.
How many days did you say it takes again to get to this stage? Just 3 days?
It depends on the seed. A bigger seed like chickpeas I don't actually know the times for every single seed. I can say that when I've done things like chickpeas and mung beans, it's been maybe a week until we ate them. And I remember with alfalfa, it was just a couple of days. But yeah, get them started, give them some water, rinse them, give them some water, rinse them. Every day, give them a little rinse and drain. And then once you see them get to what they look like in the stores, then it's time to just take them out of there, put them in the fridge. All right, any questions about sprouts? This is the one that if you do buy a lot of sprouts, this is actually gonna save you quite a bit of money. I wanna say like a bag of sprouts is something like $5 or $6, but that is maybe at most 5 cents worth of seeds. So that one's pretty costly.
You can also control how much you get because when you buy them at the store in those bags, it's so much, but it's hard to use it all before they go.
And you feel bad
Yeah.
if you're throwing away like $3 worth of sprouts.
Yeah.
For sure. So next one that we'll talk about is microgreens. So these are really similar to sprouts, but it's the second stage of a plant's growth. So sprouts have made their first two little leaves. They haven't really started photosynthesizing. This, they're actually rooting, they're making leaves, and they're starting to photosynthesize. Sprouts are incredibly nutrient dense. They have, I don't remember the exact numbers, but sprouts are like 40 times by volume, 40 times more nutrient dense than their adult forms. So if you go to little tiny kale and you have a cup of little tiny kale, there's 40 times more vitamin K, iron, vitamin C, protein in it than that same volume of grown-up. Microgreens have gotten really popular lately. They just add like a fresh pop to dishes. They have really, have you ever tried, anyone tried microgreens before? Which ones? Anyone in particular?
I used to get these kids things where it was like a carpet, and you water it, and then they grow and you peel the top off
Oh, cool.
and leave it at my windowsill. And I've tried just like they just some random ones. But I think we had some purple ones at one point. They're really good.
Nice. One thing that I love is that things like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, things that you wouldn't think like, oh, I eat the whole plant. They all, when they're just little sprouts, I mean, normally, I actually love the leaves of broccoli, but when they're just a little sprout, they don't taste like broccoli at all. They just taste like a little sprout.
Mhm.
So aside from being really nutrient dense, they're pretty easy to grow and they're also just really pretty. You see them in like fancy restaurants as a garnish. They're very delicate and kind of fine looking and they've gotten really expensive. I know at Costco they sell like a plastic tub of little microgreens for like $10. So these ones are a little more involved. They depends as far as like nutrient density goes. They've got 40 times more nutrients, but different plants will have different nutrients in it. So like red cabbage has a lot of vitamin C and vitamin K, whereas something like lettuce has more calcium, magnesium, iron. But anyway, you're getting just a whole lot of nutrients in it. One of the pros for microgreens is that you can harvest year round. There's pretty minimal requirements. You do need sun for it, but you don't need like a whole lot of sun. You can use indirect sun as well. The only thing is that they'll get a little leggy if they're not getting full sun, but they'll still turn into a nice. So this is a good example of like a leggy microgreen. It hasn't gotten full sun, so it's just stretching and reaching for that sun. Whereas something like these are a little more full and leafed out, they're getting full sun. Either way, whether you have full sun or indirect sun, you can still grow them. You can grow them throughout the year. So even if you have a window that gets full sun, so it's south facing, there's not branches or anything blocking the sun. During wintertime, the sun's at such a low angle that it's not really getting a lot of sun. Microgreens will still grow just fine. One of the cons of microgreens is that there's a lot more cost to it. So you could grow them in any little containers. You could grow them in like takeout sushi containers, old berry, get some strawberries and blueberries. Those are perfect. They've already got drain holes in them, but you do have to pay for the growing medium. So what you're actually growing them in. You got a little pre-made one that had the media with the seeds already in it. Is that right? You just peel it back and water it. So you can do that. You can do it DIY where you just buy the media, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Another con is that much like the sprouts, it's a very short window. So because they're planted so dense, they can grow to this size, but once they get any bigger than this, they're fighting for nutrients with all of their neighbors, and then they just die. So it's not quite as tight of a time window as the sprouts or my wife's sourdough bread. But you can, if you let them go much bigger than this, they'll get so tall and leggy that they'll start to fall over, and then they'll just kind of run. So once again, I don't have an exact number of days because it changes based on the species, but you can just kind of figure it out. You get some broccoli seeds, you grow them. Once they look like this, you just take some scissors and you cut them and you eat them. And then maybe you see, oh, 2 days later, they fell over and they started to rot. So you figure out what the time is for each one. And same thing, once you harvest them, they don't last forever in the fridge. So store them in ideally one of those plastic produce bags. It's great, but you can also do it in a paper bag with a paper towel to draw any excess moisture. So methods for growing these is you want to grow them in some sort of container. You can use, like I said, an old takeout container, old Tupperware. You can use those little berry boxes. It should have some sort of drainage in the bottom. So if it doesn't have holes in it, you do have to poke some holes or drill some holes. They will rot if it's just sitting in water. For the medium that you fill it with, the ideal one is called Coco Core. And that's, you can buy that at garden supply stores. You can buy it online. It's like a mature coconut. It's the husk of it, and it's really finely shredded. It's not the most sustainable material. Kind of comes with a pretty big carbon footprint, but you can reuse it, and you buy a compressed block of it. So when you get it, it looks like what, $10 for this tiny little thing, but once you pull it apart and get it wet, it's going to expand like 20 times its volume. So Coco Core is the preferred one. You can use any potting soil or any seed starting mix, ideally. Like if you go to a garden store, they'll have garden soil, they'll have potting soil, and then they'll have what's called seed starting mix. Seed starting mix works just fine too. But they, when you grow it in that Coco Core, they can grow really dense and you can reuse it. So 2 different options. See which one works best for you. You want to grow them to about 2 to 4 inches. Once they get taller than 4 inches, they fall over. Shorter than that, it's just not really worth it. They're just such a tiny little, there's not much to it. And you harvest by cutting them about 1 inch above the pot. So just take some scissors, just snip, and just harvest what you're going to eat that day. Once again, it's not like you can let them go for another week or 2. So plan for like, I'm going to start a tray of seeds, and then maybe a little bit today, a little bit tomorrow. It'll last you 3 or 4 days. You can put them in sandwiches. You can put them in smoothies since they have so much nutrients in it. If you've ever like added kale or spinach to your smoothies, it's a lot of volume. This is kind of nice. It'll give it a nice green color and green and fresh flavor, but without having to add a whole ton of it into a smoothie. And they'll keep in the fridge for about a week. Any questions about microgreens?
I've got Rose. She's saying, when I tried to grow microgreens after they first started to sprout, I would mix them with water, but the water droplets weighed the heads down and made them stick together, which made them hard to trim.
Interesting. One suggestion would be to direct water. So instead of spraying them with water, you can just get a little watering can and just get the water right on the soil rather than on the leaves. Another option is just put them under a fan. So if you've ever like started seedlings indoors, you know how you have to harden them off before you put them outdoors because they're so soft and gentle. And once they get blown over by a real wind, so you can just take a fan and put it on your microgreens or under a fan. That answered your question.
I haven't said anything else, so I think so.
Any other microgreens question? Great. Windowsill greens and herbs. This is the 3rd stage of growing a plant. So this is growing an actual full plant, roots, stem, and leaves. So this one actually needs a bit of space to grow. The nice part about this is that herbs are really expensive and I tend to need them all the time and I hate having to be like, I planned every other part of this recipe out and I need like 3 leaves of basil. And I have to drive to the store, spend $2 on a bunch of basil. I'm not even going to use it. So the herbs on demand is one of the nicest ones. You can grow a few different plants, but not bigger, bushier things. They don't really like to grow on a windowsill. Number one, they're just going to grow into the windowsill. But a windowsill is a really great way to grow stuff. You can grow things that are generally pretty expensive at a grocery store, like basil, chives, oregano, any herbs or kind of greenish things that are like an herb, like green onions, grow really well on a windowsill. It also just adds some greenery onto the windowsill itself. Like we don't have enough room to put a potted plant on the windowsill, but I have just a couple little, mason jars or some little like tin cans that we punched holes in the bottom and we'll grow just a little bit of herbs on there. It's perfect size for a windowsill. So cheaper herbs is one of the pros. You once again can grow throughout the year. You don't even need full sun, but it does need lots of light. So you don't need full on direct sun, but it does need to be on a windowsill. You can't just put it on a counter that gets some passive light. They will grow leggy when they run out of growing room. So this is an example. This basil kind of started off nice and bushy, but even though it's getting plenty of light right there, it's not reaching for the sun. It's just getting leggy because it's got no more room for its roots to grow. So you're limited in size by the size of your container. If you have a big wide windowsill where you can put something a little bigger, you could grow it in a coffee can. That basil could be a full bush, but if you just have, kind of a 4-inch wide windowsill, which is pretty standard, you might be stuck with things like little mason jars, and then you kind of just growing little bits at a time. Another thing is that you do need some drainage on it. So if you're growing them in, terracotta pots, those drain really nicely, and terracotta is good because it wicks water away. It's pretty hard to overwater in terracotta. But if you are growing in things like mason jars, the roots will run. So just don't fall too in love with your plant. Don't spend too much time or too much money on it because they won't last forever. It'll grow. It'll give you a fair bit of herbs, more than the cost of that seed, but then there's not much more life left in that little small basil. So methods are basically just get your containers. So you're going to put some potting soil in it. You don't need seed starting soil. You can just use regular potting soil. You can get it in any hardware store or garden store. Seeds, if you have the Tilth Garden Guide, which is like the Bible for Pacific Northwest gardening, it's called the Tilth Maritime Guide. They have an awesome little appendix in the back that shows all of the seeds that are suitable for Pacific Northwest. They also, on their website, have varieties that are good for crops. But you could probably just Google it too. I really like the Tilth Guide, the Territorial Seed Company. Also, I think it says that in the notes. They also have a really nice guide for what seeds go well in potatoes. But you can also just Google what varieties of basil grow best in potatoes and try to get those seeds. You can just try any old seed from the garden supply store, but container varieties are ones that are dwarf varieties, so they just won't try to get really big. So choose your seeds. If you can find a container variety, great. If not, it'll still grow. If it's really cold where you live, you can even just put like a bigger plastic bottle over it to get it going. So if something like this size to get them started, you might even just take like a plastic milk jug, cut the bottom off, flip it upside down. You've got a mini greenhouse right there. If you keep your house at, 65, 70 degrees, you're probably fine. But I like it. Put it in a sunny windowsill and harvest regularly. The more you cut, the more it'll grow. Not every herb will do that. Like cilantro, I don't think grows vegetatively, but something like basil, wherever you cut, it's going to sprout and encourage more of it. So just don't be afraid to harvest as you need it. Don't let it grow too big, otherwise it will just get leggy and run out of space. Things that go really well, like I said, chives, basil, lavender, parsley, mint, rosemary, thyme, really any herbs will grow.
Oh, we've got a question from Laura. She'd like to know, is there a right or wrong way to cut herbs to keep the growth up?
I don't know the answer to that. Like I said, I'm from experience, I'm pretty sure that cilantro, once you cut, it's done. It might keep growing from the base, but usually cilantro is harvested as a clump. Basil, I know that just cutting it just encourages more growth.
Will as well if you trim, as long as you don't cut it at the base and you're cutting off like just the pieces that you need, it'll continue to grow.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I
what
don't
works.
know that herbs are that fussy with it. Usually if you're like pruning a tree, you want to cut just below a nodule, or actually, sorry, just above. So I don't know if you can see on the Zoom. Maybe I'll move my mouse there. So on this mint, for example, so this is a nodule. This is where it branches and splits. So hypothetically speaking, if you were to cut right there, that would encourage new growth. But for something like mint, it doesn't matter. There's a nodule every inch. So you can cut there or there or there or there, or just cut it anywhere and it's gonna spread out. But it's the same thing with if you've ever pruned trees before, if you have like a branch, you want to cut it just below where it branches off so that it'll, just above where it branches off so that it'll now split there. That's too nuanced for herbs. Just cut it wherever you want. It'll be fine. All right. Mushroom blocks. So these have gotten really popular lately. I think this is, I'm a big fan of foraging mushrooms. I go out and I pick mushrooms every season. Growing mushrooms is actually a really interesting experience because you can grow mushroom species that you generally wouldn't find even out in the forest. So in the forest here in the Northwest, we have what are called the most common popular mushrooms. Has anyone ever tried a mushroom that grows wild here? What have you had?
Oh, morels.
Morels, okay.
I'm also a forager.
So we normally we think of things like chanterelles, morels, king boletes. Those are all really popular. So those are mycorrhizal mushrooms. They grow symbiotically with a conifer tree. So you will only find them within 100 feet of a fir tree or a cedar tree or a spruce tree because they need that relationship with the roots to grow. A lot of these mushrooms are called decomposers, and they grow on sawdust, dead trees. You can find those out in the woods, but they're much harder to find. Like you need to find just the right age dead tree, just the right season. So these are really cool because you could grow mushrooms that you may have never seen in a store before, try some new things, and they're fairly cheap. Mushrooms are a really good source of vitamin D. Nutritionally speaking, they're about evenly split, carbs, fats, and proteins, depends on the species. Some of them are really pretty, and it's also just a cool learning opportunity to watch a mushroom grow. The way these mushroom blocks work is you are purchasing from a store a bag of sterilized sawdust. So this is, does anybody know what this mushroom's called? Lion's mane mushroom. Lion's mane only likes to grow on certain dead trees. It likes to grow on alder, likes to grow on beech, it likes to grow on oak, I think. No, not oak, cottonwood. And what they'll do is they'll take that wood, they'll shred it up, turn it into sawdust, and then they'll sterilize it by boiling it. So it kills all the other mushroom species growing on it. Then they'll take the spores from the lion's mane mushroom, mix it up with a little bit of water, and inject it into the bag. And then those spores will start to grow and eat the sawdust, and they'll make what's called mycelium, which is all of the roots of the fungus. But it won't actually produce a fruit until you cut that bag open, because it knows that so the mushroom is the fruit of the fungus, and it won't make a fruit until it has somewhere for it to go. So you could get this block, you could just keep it in a cool space in your house, and when you're ready to start growing mushrooms, it'll come with some instructions. You just make a little slit in the bag, And all you have to do is spray it with some water once in a while if it starts to dry out, especially if it's during winter time when you have the heat on, house gets really dry. And it'll grow these beautiful mushrooms. And then to harvest, same thing as the microgreens, you just cut them off and it'll grow a new mushroom out. Each one of these blocks costs about 25 bucks, and they will give you about $25 to $50 worth of mushrooms. So the ways, one of the pros for this is that you can have some really, really tasty mushrooms on hand. When you go to a grocery store, normally they just have, what mushrooms do you see at your grocery store?
Wait, or
The little white button ones.
Yeah.
Portobello,
Portobellos. Portobellos are actually the same as the white button
Yeah.
ones. They're just big.
big, yeah, or
I
baby
love it.
portobello, which is the same thing as the white
Yeah.
mushrooms, but they're little.
I love those big portobellos. I know it's the
Meaty.
same species, but they taste so much meatier.
Yeah,
Yeah. So those are usually the ones that you see. Sometimes Costco will stock chanterelles,
Yeah.
which are only wild available. But this lets you grow some really cool mushrooms. You know what they're grown in. If you're foraging wild mushrooms, mushrooms can absorb toxins out of the soil. So you have to be really careful with where you're foraging. That's why you never want to pick mushrooms next to a roadway, because they might have absorbed toxins from like brake dust, oil, things like that. This is pretty safe. You know exactly what they're growing in. And when you buy it, it'll tell you what sawdust it's from. It's sterilized. You can also upscale this if you like doing the mushrooms and you don't like the cost to reward ratio of a $25 mushroom block to $50 of mushrooms. You can DIY it. You could get that sawdust yourself. You could sterilize it, and you could cut open your mushroom block, put it in a bigger bucket with sawdust, and grow even more mushrooms. There's a lot of ways to scale it up. But generally, starting small with just a mushroom block is pretty simple DIY. Cons, you need to keep it pretty clean. If you are scaling it up, you need some way to sterilize your sawdust, which professionally they use autoclave. You can do it with a microwave too. Yeah, so basically you're going to purchase a mushroom kit. You can DIY it. There's instructions online for how to DIY it, and I'll share my favorite website with you in a minute. But basically, if you DIY it, you're going to get some sort of material that mushroom likes to grow on, whether it's sawdust, whether it's barley there, and then you're going to buy the liquid spawn culture. So that's the spores. You inject it into there. It's going to grow, and then once you see the mycelium growing, you open it up. So in a bag, you cut holes in it. In a jar, you take the lid off. It's a plastic bucket. You drill holes in it, and then the mushrooms will start to grow down. My favorite website for purchasing this stuff is fieldandforest.com. Fieldandforest.com. I believe that's a double check. So they are based in Wisconsin. There are local ones. No, that's not it. Field and Forest. Oh, fieldforest.net. So the company is called Field and Forest. They sell mushroom blocks, they sell the spawn, but they've got a huge variety. There's some local suppliers here in Olympia. There's one called Mycoa Bryzel. At local farmers markets, you'll often see people selling these blocks.
Adam's
and they-
mushrooms, sells
yeah.
blocks.
Okay. They always come with instructions, but the instructions are pretty simple. Just once you see the mycelium growing, cut a hole in it, cut a couple holes in it, spray it with water once a day, harvest the mushrooms. Once it stops harvesting mushrooms, you just cut open the bag, dump it out in the yard or in the compost, and it's just solvents. Any questions about growing mushrooms?
So risk of it expanding elsewhere into your home or the garden?
Unless you have a lot of its preferred growth substrate.
Hmm.
So if for some reason you built your garden bed with a bunch of rotting alder or
Mhm.
alder sawdust, well, actually, no, there is no risk, because the reason why these mushrooms grow so well is because this has been sterilized. If you had a bunch of dead alder or trees that it likes to grow on, chances are it's been dead for a couple of weeks. After about 2 weeks, there's so many fungal spores in the air right now. Like, we're breathing in thousands of them with every breath. they're just floating around everywhere. They already colonize, and then that mushroom has to compete. So generally, unless for some reason you had a bunch of fresh sawdust sitting around, there's no risk of it contaminating things in your garden.
They're actually pretty hard to get to grow, so it's more like, oh, I hope it goes.
I've started growing some mushrooms outdoors, and it's always a challenge. Like when a tree falls, my friends will call me and I'll quickly go over there with the chainsaw and I'll buy the sawdust and I'll drill holes in the log and put it in there. But a lot of times some other mushroom is just beat into it.
Mhm.
It got there first.
Mhm.
And then, maybe a year or two later, you'll start to see a mushroom grow. Oh, I got my shiitakes or my turkey tails. And then it's just some random mushroom that's not in. All right, mushroom blocks. Next one we'll talk about is growing from scraps. So this is where you take cuttings of vegetables and you put them in water and then they grow a little bit. Once again, this is not a whole lot of growth. You can turn a eyed potato into some fresh potato greens. You can turn carrot tops into some fresh carrot tops. You can turn little half-cut spring onions into more spring onions, but you're never going to be able to grow like a whole carrot from a carrot top or a whole beet. You're just growing some of the fresh greens out of it. I think this is more of like a curiosity. It's cool to see and it's cool to watch. And it also just costs nothing. So growing from scraps, you're just reusing your food scraps. There's no cost really and low materials. All you need is just some little tray that you can put, half an inch of water in. And you just take your veggies, leave the leaf part. So the tops of the carrots, the tops of the beets, the tops of the kohlrabi or celery, or I guess the bottom of the celery. Stick it in the water and it'll grow some fresh greens. You harvest it, compost the rest. Pretty straightforward. The cons are you just don't get that much out of it. You do need some sunlight to get them growing. So same thing, you put out a windowsill. And then lastly, don't leave it for too long or that water is going to get really slimy and gross. So if you do get really attached to your things that are growing and you want it to get a little bit bigger and your water starts to get slimy, you just drain the water and put some fresh water in it. But after about a week, that water is going to get pretty gross. So it's a pretty short little turnaround thing. Cut some carrots, put the tops in there. In about 3 to 5 days, they'll start growing some fresh carrot greens. Cut those carrot greens, put them in salad. End of story. Any questions about growing scraps?
I do that with basil stems, like Thai basil stems, because my mother and my mother-in-law, they all said, oh, that's just easy, you just put it in soil and it just grows. And I've done that multiple times, it just dies. I tried putting it in soil, I tried sprouting it first in water, and I don't know. If you have tips for that?
I would kind of have to see the plant. Each plant grows a little differently. So for example, the beet is growing, or the radish is growing. That's where it vegetatively grows. So it grows up. Whereas the celery is the opposite direction. So I wonder if maybe if you cut the top of the Thai basil and then stuck it into water, if it might be better to actually take the root section of the Thai basil. So you've grown it, harvest the tops, and then you just pull up the root section, stick it in some water, and it might be able to grow some new little sprouts. But
Like the little parts, I try to pick bigger parts of the stem. They don't seem to work, so maybe I'll try the part where it has the flower. Part.
if it's already flowered, it won't root. So that's like the end of the plant's life. So if it's already started to make flowers and seeds, it's done. So you won't be able to get it to root. But if you get it while it's still young, try doing exactly what you did, but take a young stem, stick it in some water, and you'll start to see it'll grow some little white water roots. And then it might keep growing. But yeah, I wouldn't try too hard on it. Like I said, you don't get that much.
Yeah, it sounds like the flowering might be an issue.
It's like, do you ever buy Thai basil from the grocery store and it comes on, it has a really nice stem. Most of the time it's just like bushy leaves, so I try to get that big stem in the center,
Mhm.
parts of it. with sometimes with the exostems, different parts, and it's really been unsuccessful.
Yeah, sorry, I can't help you.
Okay.
I wish I knew more. So once again, just get the root end of the veggies, put in a bowl of water, watch for new growth, and just harvest until it doesn't make any more. So we'll talk pretty briefly about some of the more expensive methods. So grow tents, lights, and hydroponics. This is really like you can grow a lot of food indoors, but it costs a lot of money. So you could grow actual full-size veggies indoors, and you can even grow your plants from outdoors. If you have them in containers, you could move them indoors during the winter. So we grow our tomatoes in pots because they take so much room in the garden, and then we take the pots or the buckets and move them indoors when it gets too cold. So you can move outdoor plants indoors. The benefit is continual harvest. You can grow throughout the year. You can do all sorts of plants in there, and you could really custom tailor it. But like I said, it is very expensive and time consuming. And because humans have been growing zucchinis outdoors for a couple thousand years, we've only been trying to grow them indoors for maybe the last 40 or 50 years. So there's just not that much readily accessible information about growing things indoors. The basic method for doing things like grow tents is that you need some sort of little mini greenhouse or tent to grow it in that's going to control the humidity and the temperature. So things that you need some sort of tent. You need some sort of fan because those plants need air moving across them. They will never be able to get big enough if they aren't hardened off of it. They'll just get so soft and tender that the moment they grow a pepper or a tomato, they're just gonna bend over and collapse. So you need a fan moving across them, and then you need grow lights. Grow lights. Now that we have LEDs, they don't use. You've had that thing's got the biggest smile.
Future hydroponics farmer.
What's that?
Future hydroponics farmer.
Now that we have LED lights, they don't use a ton of electricity, but they can be really expensive to get started with. So you also need an LED light. You can't use just any fluorescent or LED light. It should be specific for growing plants. People have been growing weed indoors for so long that it's actually pretty readily available. These grow lights, you can get them at just Home Depot, but you can go to actual like indoor aquaponic hydroponic supplies, and they're called like a grow light. And the only difference between that and these lights is that these lights are emitting a certain frequency of light that we find visually appealing. Grow lights more or less kind of look like white light, but they have more red light in it and violet blue light. So it's what the plants actually need. When the sun hits it, they're getting the full spectrum of light all the way from OIG-BIV, right? And on either side, ultraviolet and infrared. But these lights are only emitting just what we want to see. So that's why you need a grow light. You need high powered grow lights, and you also need to move them up. So if you've ever started seeds indoors, you keep your grow light, a couple inches above, and then as your plants move up, you have to lift it up and lift it up. It's kind of like that here too. Aquaponics and hydroponics are really similar to growing in a tent or indoors, except instead of growing in soil, you're growing them in water. This is an incredibly efficient way to grow food. I've done this with students, and we grew massive heads of lettuce in such a small area. That being said, you're dealing with a lot of water indoors. The whole point of this indoor gardening class was like, if you're renting or you don't have a lot of space, most people who are renting don't want to risk having 50 gallons of water that could potentially spill and cause tens of thousands of dollars of damage. That being said, they do make some really small little aquaponics kits that you can get. It's like a little mini thing. I meant to bring it today, but I left it at the office. You can just buy little tiny ones, and they just have a little place for water in the bottom. They come with a little bottle of fertilizer, and you mix a cap in with your water, and then it just has a little bubbler, and it has a couple little pots that are full of clay balls, and it's got like a little cube of coco coir, and you start a seed in it. So they come with all the instructions. Once again, at a small scale, this is more like, oh, it's just kind of fun learning experience. At a big scale, it's really productive. But I'm happy to talk with anyone about big scale aquaponics or hydroponics after the class. I figure most people who are here probably are not interested in investing $20,000 in putting something indoors like that. If you are interested, the difference between those terms, hydroponics is you put the fertilizer in the water. So you mix up fertilizer for the amount of water that you're using. Aquaponics, you have a separate tank that you're growing fish in. Feed the fish poop, that water gets circulated to your plants. The plants use the nutrients from the fish poop. It cleans the water, it goes back to the fish. It's pretty cool. You get fish and plants, but kind of a lot of work. Then the very last thing that we're going to talk about today is maybe you don't want to grow anything indoors at all. Maybe you want to go outdoors and harvest. So has anyone ever done any foraging for mushrooms, plants? Would you like to share what you forage?
Berries and wild blueberries and stuff palmy.
Awesome.
Trail right off of some of that stuff palmy and
Cool. What did you like about, like, what was your motivation for foraging? Was it for the huckleberries? Was it for being outdoors? A little bit of both?
it was exciting. I went on I was on a hike and then the lady that was leading us was like, oh, by the way, she had some environmental background. She's like, oh, look, you can eat these ones and you can eat these ones. And so then since then, whenever I see them, I get excited and I tell people about it and it's like munching on the way. Because it just tastes so different than strawberries.
Yeah. Do you ever get an onion huckleberry? You ever eaten one? You're just like, whoa, there's a slight flavor of garlic in it.
I could tell, but there were some where I was just like, I don't like that. So maybe that was it.
Every once in a while, I get a huckleberry, particularly the giant huckleberry, big purple ones. That's got just a savory flavor. They're interesting. But that's just normal. So what's that?
Huckle and berry.
A little bit more huckle than berry. That's a good way of saying it. What have you for it?
Oh, morel mushrooms for sure. I'm from the Midwest, so morels have a short grow season and it's like mushroom season there. Everybody forages. That's common. I grew up doing that. And then we don't have them here, but in the Midwest they grow pretty popularly, a lot like Marionberry does out here. Mulberry. They're a dark purple berry, similar to a blackberry, sweeter than a blackberry, and yeah, dark purple in color rather than black or blue. You use them to make pie. They have a structure like a blackberry, that's sort of like multi-berry all in one. I would say sweeter, very, very sweet. So I forage for those a lot, yeah.
Anyone on the Zoom? Anyone foraged before?
Nobody is offering any foraging history on the Zoom.
So there are a lot of great books about foraging in Washington. I have one made by Falcon Guide as the publisher. It's just called Foraging Washington. And I really like that one because it has not just native plants, but also invasive non-native. And those are a really nice thing to start with, particularly down here at sea level where we have a lot of people and not a lot of plants. When you go up to Snoqualmie or up above 5,000 foot, there's a lot more plants and a lot less people. But that's really kind of inaccessible sometimes, is to get up into morel country, to get into huckleberry country. Down at sea level, there's a lot of really nice invasives and non-natives that you can start with. And the Falcon Guide has a bunch of them. So things like dandelion, they sell bunches of dandelion greens at the co-op for like $5, and you can just go out in the yard. I mean, assuming it's not somewhere where a dog pees. You can just go pick dandelion greens. They're very nice. They've got a slightly bitter flavor. Dandelion flowers can be made into a lovely tea. Other things like dock, cress, miner's lettuce. A lot of these just grow right here around town. You just want to find an area where it's safe to forage, where there's not dogs peeing on it. It's not on the side of the road. So something like the people.
And looks like Laura from the Zoom is saying blackberries as well.
Oh, yeah, we're lousy with blackberries. That's a
Yeah,
good one.
they're everywhere.
So dandelions, plantain. We have a picture of plantain. I don't have a picture of plantain on here, but those are commonly used as medicinal for like a poultice, but they're also edible.
I think them.
No, this is a weed called a plantain. Plantago lanceolata is the Latin name. But there's several different plantains. They're a small little plant that kind of looks like a dandelion. They grow even a little lower to the ground. They don't make a tall flower. Clover is edible, as is chickweed, which is one of my favorites. You can just pluck that and eat that raw. Right now, there's a native that is edible that's growing. It just started. It is nettle season. They're coming out in full, and they are amazing.
Yeah.
That's a native one. So find somewhere you are going to forage. It's really important to forage responsibly. So we're just going to watch a short little video that was made by Robin Wall Kimmerer, who owned Breeding Sweetgrass, who talks about some of the ethics behind foraging.
If I could choose just a single element of the traditional teachings that we're called to pick up, it would be the teachings of the honorable harvest, which were taught us by the plants, who give us everything that we need. It's a covenant of reciprocity between humans and the living world, a very sophisticated ethical protocol. One of the first steps of the honorable harvest is to understand that the lives that we are taking are the lives of generous beings, of sovereign beings. And in order to accept their gift, we owe them at least our attention. To care for them, we must know what they need. And at the very minimum, we should know their names. And yet, the average American can name over 100 corporate logos and 10 plants. Is it a surprise that we have accepted a political system that grants personhood to corporations and no status at all for wild rice and redwoods? The protocols for the honorable harvest are not really written down, but if they were, it would look something like this. When you get to the woods, you don't just start grabbing everything in sight. We're taught never to take the first plant that you see, and that means you'll never take the last. This is a prescription with inherent conservation value. And then if we encounter another plant, we ask permission. I've always been taught to address that plant, to introduce myself, and tell it what it is that I have come for. If you're going to take a life, you have to be personally accountable for it. I know there are places where if you talk to a plant, they think you are crazy, but in our way, it's just good manners. If you're going to ask, you have to listen for the answer. You can listen in different ways, pragmatically, intuitively. Look around, see whether those plants have enough to share. And if the answer is no, you go home. For we remember that they don't belong to us. And taking without permission is also known as stealing. And the Honorable Harvest counsels that we also take in such a way that does the least harm and in a way that benefits the growth of the plant. Use everything that you take. It's disrespectful of the life that's given to waste it. The next tenet of the Honorable Harvest is to share it with others, human and non. The earth has shared generously with us, so we have to model that behavior in return. And a culture of sharing, we know, is a culture of resilience. Plant gatherers often leave a spiritual gift behind, but it can also be a material gift. Weeding, caretaking, spreading seeds, helping those plants to flourish. We give songs, we give ceremony, we give our respect, we give fertilizer. Every breath that you take is a breath that was made for you by plants. On the water that you drink, whether you're in an urban setting, whether you're on a remote mountaintop, we still are recipients of those gifts. And if we take the time to be grateful, that brings us into that state of humility, of understanding that we are not at the top of a biological hierarchy, that in fact we are the younger brothers of creation.
So I think that's really important to share, particularly with when I teach foraging to kids,
We've got a question.
because there's such a natural excitement of just like, oh my God, I learned how to identify this plant. Just take it all. So remembering things like never take the first because it might be the last. Asking, whether it's verbally or just in your head, just thinking about like, okay, why am I taking this plant? And making sure that you're going to actually use it. With foraging, I've been out where I've collected a bunch of nettles and then come home and be like, oh my God, I have to clean the house and walk the dog. You only have about 24 hours to process all of that, and it takes so much time to process it. So there was the first time I collected nettles, I took the lives of 100 plants and then threw them away. They went in my compost because I just didn't have time to process them. So being mindful of that stuff. And one reason why I say like what that looks like to me is at sea level, there's just not that many native plants. You can go walk around some of the parks around here, Viridian Habitat Park and Brisbane Forest, and you might see a couple little nettles. And that's really important to let those go to seed and spread throughout. It's really just, you might find just enough for a couple of meals, if you went through the whole forest. So at sea level or in our urban areas, I say invasive. Oh, I lost my PowerPoint.
Oh, it's okay.
I say invasive. We're still
Mhm.
projecting here. That was the PowerPoint anyways. I say, go for it. Dandelions, chickweed, blackberries. You could just go to town on it, not feel bad about it. But things like natives, particularly camas, is endangered, and many of the tribes have requested that be reserved just for tribal use. So never harvesting stuff like camas, but things like nettles. Just being mindful. If you're in an area with a ton of nettles, you can absolutely take some. Just be mindful to not take more than what you need.
Liz would like to know, do you have any suggestions for learning about local foraging? Like, are there any classes or courses that you're aware of?
Yeah, if you want to get into mushroom foraging, that is really high risk. We don't have a lot of poisonous plants in Washington, but we do have some poisonous mushrooms. So a really good way to get started with mushroom foraging is to join a local mushroom club. There's the South Sound Mushroom Club at Olympia, which I'm a part of. On the Kitsap Peninsula, there's the Kitsap Peninsula Mycological Society. And then the King County has, I forget what it's called, but if you just search for mushrooms, Puget Sound, they're the first one that comes up. We don't really have a local like Pierce County Tacoma group. Folks will either go down to Olympia or go up to Seattle. So start maybe a Tacoma one. So for mushrooms, that's a really good way to get started. Another good way to DIY it if you don't want to join a club, Daniel Winkler's book, Fruits of the Forest, is the best way to get started with mushrooming. He talks about 14 different species that have no toxic lookalikes. They're all really tasty and they're easy to pick and easy to identify, most importantly. Things like agaricus mushrooms, so the little white button mushrooms we were talking about, those have toxic ones in the same genus and lookalikes. So those are really scary to pick, but something like a chicken of the woods mushroom or some of the ones we saw in those pictures, there's nothing in the world that looks like them. So you can't mistake it for something that'll kill you. So that's why I recommend his book, is it just gives you 14 mushrooms right off the bat that you can easily learn how to identify and pick. And then as far as foraging goes, there are some local groups that go out foraging. I live in Olympia, so I don't actually know the names of local foraging groups here, but if you use social media, you just search for foraging, you'll probably find a local group. Would be my best recommendation.
We've got somebody in the chat that's attending today is saying that the Facebook group Pacific Northwest Foraging and Wild Edibles is a really good local group. As your local librarian, I'm going to say there's a lot of really great information on the internet. There are a lot of really great social groups that you can join on Facebook, on Reddit. I just want to caution you when you're using those groups and you're getting information online. There's a lot of information today that is being generated by AI. A lot of that information is not correct, okay? And it's really, really important to fact check when you're looking at that kind of information. And nowadays, we also need to be very careful about books. The books in your local library are curated by a librarian who has selected them for their legitimacy and their accuracy. But if you're buying a book on Amazon, please, 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 especially if you're foraging and you're foraging for things that have toxic lookalikes, to make sure that it is a legitimate source of information from somebody that actually knows what they're talking about, because self-publishing exists now, and artificial intelligence is now self-publishing novels. So actually, there was very recently last year a self-published wild mushroom foraging book that was written by an artificial intelligence that instructed people to eat toxic mushrooms. Okay, so it's serious. Please take it seriously and just be very careful. Okay.
Good point. We only have one or two species that are pretty rare that will kill you for
Mhm.
mushrooms.
Yeah.
Destroying angels, which are sometimes found, death camps.
Mhm.
We have a lot of mushrooms that give you an upset stomach.
Like there are false morels. They look just like the
Yeah,
real thing,
those
but
will
they'll
put
make
you
you
on the
sick.
toilet for a
Mhm.
day or two.
But if you cut them open, they're not hollow inside like a morel is. So that's an easy way to distinguish the difference between the two.
So yeah, generally it's a pretty safe hobby to get into. The best way, as you said, is a good book
Mhm.
and going out with an experienced forager. So the example I use is like tell a tangerine apart from an orange. They look really similar. They're both orange, they're citrusy, but you can tell the obvious differences. They're sometimes hard to explain, but once you've held them in your hands, you're never going to mistake a mandarin from a navel orange. When you look at a picture of the two in a book, side by side, the scale may not be the same, just those subtle things. So actually going out with somebody who knows mushrooms, who's an experienced mushroomer, who can pick a chanterelle for you and hold it for you and give it to you and say 100% this is a chanterelle. Once you hold it and see it, you're never going to mistake it for a chanterelle. Also, farmers markets sometimes sell wild mushrooms. So that's a good way. Just ask them nicely, be like, hey, can I hold and smell your mushroom? Matsutakes are one of the most expensive mushrooms. They have a toxic lookalike, but the defining thing about a Matsutake mushroom is it smells like a mix of cinnamon and socks. Once you've smelled it once, you'll never forget it. But like I can't imagine the smell in my head. So if you go to a farmer's market and they have Matsutakes, just ask real nicely, like, hey, can I smell your Matsutake? And then once you've smelled it once, you'll go out in the field and you'll be like, that's the one. And if you don't smell that smell, leave it be. All right. So of all the methods that we talked about, which ones might any of you like to try? You can type it into the chat on Zoom or share out here.
Definitely the sprouts with the jar. Because I've tried it before, but I think I just had too much water standing. So I had just this mushy, stinky, gross.
Okay.
I'm gonna try it with less, or just rinse it, dump it.
Yeah.
And then foraging, I really want to try.
Cool. Well, I highly recommend the Falcon Guide for plants. Falcon, it's just called Falcon Guide to Foraging in Washington. And if you can, join the mushroom front.
I'm probably gonna try the windowsill herbs, and then foraging.
I'm actually currently trying to grow a bunch of vegetables from seed. I'm actually gonna put it in my garden, but I'm interested in the sprouting and stuff. The sprouts, I've never tried that before.
My husband and I just bought a house, so we're probably gonna try some herbs in the windowsill this summer. Yeah, we sell herbs at my house. I don't have anything in the chat on Zoom.
All right. Right on. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining. I have some little evaluations that just help us improve. We'd love your feedback if you would like to sit and take one, but also it's 6:17. I'm sure everyone's probably hungry, so absolutely no pressure. But this just lets us know what we're doing well and what we can improve on in the future. If anyone would like to hang out, just ask any questions or pull up some links that we talked about. I'm happy to do so. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. It was really great getting to talk plants and mushrooms and growing stuff with everyone. And thank you on Zoom for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Everyone's saying thank you for the great class and for your time, and I want to thank you all for coming today. For those of you who are physically in the building, I did pull from our collection all of the books that we currently have in the building on indoor gardening. So if you'd like to check out some books on this subject, please feel free to look through them and check them out up at the help desk. They'll be happy to help you with that. And then our calendar is also available there. If you're looking for future programs similar to this one, they will be listed in our upcoming calendar.
I think, I'm not sure if you have the Pierce County classes on your upcoming calendar or not. But in addition to the library classes, Pierce County also offers free gardening classes throughout the year. To search for Pierce County gardening classes. And that'll take you to a couple each month. They're both in person and online.
Okay,
Cool.
thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank
great
you.
night.
Thank you. Thank you very much.